Hello everyone, my name is Ibis Garcia and I am an assistant professor at the University of Utah, and I wrote this paper with Dr. Divya Chandrasekhar, also at the University of Utah, and it's titled Impact of Hurricane Maria to the Civic Sector, a Profile of Nonprofits in Puerto Rico. The rationale of this study is that, as we know, nonprofits are key actors in long-term disaster recovery. But the question is here is do they have the capacity to provide the recovery services? So what affects recovery capacity of nonprofits after there's a disaster? And the goal here is to fit into the capacity building action research of the Center for Puerto Rican Studies and IDEA common. So about the data collection, we collected this data on June of 2019, and it was a random sample of the phone calls made by Metrica, and 345 nonprofits were selected from a database that we created, and the response was actually really good. It was 68 response rate, or 235 survey responses, and 20 interviews as well. And this is just a very rough profile of who responded. So 99% were incorporated in Puerto Rico, 80% were incorporated at the federal level, which is very important because this is a criteria to be able to receive federal funds. 99% have a board in place. The median year establishment, it was signed in 1996. Median number of employees was 5, which means that most of these nonprofits are small nonprofits. And the median number of board meetings is 6 per year. And 64% directly involve the community members in their operations. So we asked also these questions to see how connected are these nonprofits to residents, and it seems that they really are, which is also part of the rationale of why nonprofits are so important in terms of recovery. And we found respondents in 46 municipalities. So one of the questions was what is your mission? And as you can see here, the majority of the organizations, 24% do human resources, followed by 17% education. Then we have 17% healthcare and religion related. And then we have housing and shelter, community development, and even public safety and disaster relief. We asked how were you affected, and as you can see, 44% of them had damages to their buildings, and about 25% had increased demand for services. 7% lost employees. They also lost information and data, among other losses. But here, what I wanted you to pay attention is that there was an increased demand for services. This was very obvious in our interviews. So people that were working in these nonprofits, they themselves had individual needs and family needs. Nonetheless, they were out there in the community helping people, and they had a lot of demand, because there was also a lot of need as well. And at the same time, people in these nonprofit organizations were losing employees. Many of them, again, were personally affected, or they migrated. So that's another angle of looking at the increased demand. And we asked them, has your mission changed after the disaster? And as you can see, there was changes, but the majority of organizations weren't involved in disaster preparedness, and now you see a large increase here. We also asked them about their interaction with other organizations, and as you might expect, nonprofit organizations are now communicating more with other local nonprofits, but they're communicating less with government organizations. So at least they feel like there's less interactions, or they're less supported. And similarly, this is true for diaspora organizations, which is not something that we were really expecting. And these are just some of the quotes saying that now there's like a lot of networking opportunities, and that people have been able to make connections with other nonprofits and plan to together. On the other hand, the services and communication with the government have been practically just zero, or they feel that they're not getting the attention that they might deserve, and that there's not a lot of direct communication. And we also asked them about grants and whether or not they knew about particular grants and whether or not they apply for them. As you can see, a lot of people know about FEMA or even like CDBG home hot funds, but there's a big gap in the number that of people or organizations that have actually applied. Um, and then we asked them, well, how do you hear about information? And the majority is like through like social media and also the news, but doing like web searches and a lot of word of mouth and from different organizations as well. So I just wanted to point out that this very important interaction that a lot of people are communicating through social media and through those like networks that they have. We asked like, well, what do you like to see more of in terms of workshops and opportunities, more information, more technical assistance, training, recovery issues, more social networking, access to data, and advocacy for the mission. And something that we didn't include it was more funding, but of course people did mention it in the category of other. So there was a lot of people that and organizations that were interested in more funding. And as I said, for example, they need like great knowledge of like how to receive funds from the government. And other people talked about how they were in a position of like growing, and they needed more resources to be able to have a greater reach. So we asked them specifically about the networking, and 26% of the organizations are engaging in this like networking, and they particularly mention organizations such as the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, Foundation for Puerto Rico, Ayuda Legal, and you have like a list of organizations, including like some of them that are not local, like Hispanic Federation, Unidos for Puerto Rico. So they are connected, but still about 75% are not connected. So there's like there's the need to reach these organizations so they can increase their capacity and networking. And other people talked about funding and how there was this interest in partnering with organizations in the island, but maybe there's like people from the outside or larger organizations trying to like network with smaller organizations because they had more resident connections, and that they needed to be like careful about those types of partnerships. Something that we found very interesting is that the organizations in Puerto Rico are very dependent from donations from members. So most of these organizations, 45% of like their funds are through members, which also implies that many of these organizations are very small organizations, but 32% of them receive like donations from private entities. About 16% of them receive funding from the central government. But again, there's a need for more grant making and for external sources of funding. So as a conclusion, we have found that there's a lot of energy in the nonprofit sector in terms of them changing missions, increasing the demand, having intensified local interaction, particularly among themselves. And they are aware of this, of course, but they want more help with capacity building across the board, from better understanding of technical recovery issues and mitigation to grant writing. So thank you so much.